But when you were that kid growing up, I mean, what was the ambition to be? Did you want to be Frank Sinatra? Did you want to be Oscar Peterson? I mean, who was it?
Well, I think, you know, you just mentioned two people that were a huge influence on me. You know, if I could play like Oscar and sing like Frank when I was 8, you know.
Perfect, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I'd talk about Beethoven. I mean.
Yeah, it'd be pretty great. Yeah. But, you know, as I grew older, as I went through I'm 32 now, and I think it's sort of a pattern among jazz musicians. When they get to be around 30, their own style just sort of seems to come out. And I stopped listening to the Frank Sinatra records. I stopped listening to Oscar Peterson records and the hundreds of other artists that I was into and started playing.
I mean, that kind of singing, Sinatra invented it, didn't he? It was, I mean, he stood in front of a big band and
he
defined what the rest of you do.
He did.
I mean, everybody's been influenced from that point of view.
Everybody. Now, the song that we just played has about as much to do with Frank Sinatra as haggis. But when, you know, the next song that I do, I'm sure people will see how he's had an influence on me. And from a technical standpoint, he was that was it. That was the best that ever lived. Nobody, in my opinion, I don't think anybody could touch him.
Well, I think that was a gentleman. You told me once another interview that we did about Quincy Jones' assessment of him.
That's exactly right. I asked him, I said, Quincy, how much did Frank Sinatra know? Because I'm the guy who writes the music for the band to play, so I sort of have a bird's eye view of what's going on, whereas Sinatra would come out and sing the song, and Quincy Jones would write the arrangement for the band to play. So I wanted to know how much Frank Sinatra really knew about what was going on underneath him. And he said, Harry, Frank Sinatra knew everything. He knew every chord, the ways the chords were assembled underneath him. He knew it all.
Yes.
It's very impressive to hear that.
Do you know him at all? You knew him, obviously. You met him.
I met him a couple of times. How much time do we have? A really funny story.
We've got bags of time.
Okay, because it takes 2 hours.
We were okay. You might have to take your clothes off.
I was performing among many other singers at his 75th birthday party. And the singers that were there were Joe Williams, Ella Fitzgerald, Jack Jones, Tony Bennett, just the best singers alive. In fact, I was so nervous to perform, I saw Ella Fitzgerald sitting backstage, sort of going like this. I said, Miss Fitzgerald, are you okay? She goes, oh, it's just that I'm so nervous. I'm saying, you're nervous? I gotta follow you and Frank singing Ladies at Tramp. That's what I had to follow. So I was about 23 years old. So I go out on stage, and I'm looking, and about the relationship to where your audience is to me, that's where Sinatra was sitting. And I was singing one of Quincy Jones's arrangements with Henry Mancini conducting the band. So I had sort of great art in every direction, no place to hide. Pick up the microphone, and I sang the first line, and I said, I'm going to show this guy what I can do. And the second line came around, and I could not remember that song to save my life. Nothing came out of my mouth. And I see my then girlfriend, my wife now, she's looking at me like, what are you doing? You know, this is what you've been waiting for, to sing for this man. And I said, Mr. Sinatra, I stopped the band. I said, I can't continue because I'm terribly nervous right now, and I don't get nervous. That's just not something that happens to me, and I was really nervous. So anyway, later we see him in an elevator, and he was very upset because they couldn't find his driver that was going to take him home. So he's in the elevator with his wife and a bodyguard, and I'm there with my girlfriend, Jill. And I said, Mr. Sinatra, I'm Harry Connick. I'm the guy who forgot the words tonight. I got to let you know I'm a lot better than what you just saw. Blah, 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 blah. I'm going on and on. And he's looking at me. He didn't say anything. And the elevator doors open, and I'm waiting for these great words of wisdom to come out of his mouth. And he puts my wife's face in his hands, and he goes, you're beautiful. And he gives her a kiss and walks out. So that's...
You met him too, didn't you, Jimmy?
Yes, I did. I had two wonderful experiences with him. I was in Miami at the Fontainebleau Hotel, and I'd done a show on the Palladium in England with George Raft, who was Frank looked after a lot. And this fellow just said, Frank wants to see you. So I said, Frank who? They went, the man. Sinatra. Well, Pauline and I, we were kids, up to the room, changed, bumped down, and he was sat there with a fellow called Ben Novak, who owned the Fontainebleau Hotel. And he stood up, he went, how are you, Jimmy? And it was like in a film. Yeah. And I went, hello, Mr. Sinatra. He said, Frank, sit down. He sat down with Pauline. First thing he said, should we have a couple of photographs taken? First thing I was going to say to him, I said, yes, please. And we went on this boat. And I didn't drink then. I have made up for it since, Harry, but I didn't drink then. And the waiter said, Mr. Sinatra, what do you take? He said, I'll take a little Jack Daniels on the rocks. Sir? I said, I'll take a little Jack Daniels on the rocks. And Pauline was opposite me, went, what? I went, shh. Jack Daniels on the rocks with Frank. Yes, Frank. I mean, I was like Bostic. I was stuck to him. He was going nowhere. And he went, here's looking at you. I went, yeah. And he went down my throat. And he went, you like it? And it was just wonderful. And he was just great to two kids from England. He was superb, man.